The Ministry of Education and Sport. Welcome, my lady. MP Ulysse Eliane, Justice and Security Committee, House of Representatives of the Netherlands, is coming. And last but certainly not least, I'm proud to invite our own Ethan Bergman, EJA's Director of Youth Development and Creative Project, who will help us with translation if needed, and later will reveal us one of EJA's most fascinating projects to come. Dear member of the Assembly, please.
Excellence, honorable members, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks so much to the European Jewish Association for giving us the opportunity to be here. France has a long history of anti-Semitism from the late 19th century to the Vichy regime, with an incredible resurgence of racist acts since the 80s, which are increasing in number ever since. This is why a criminal response has gradually been built up. On one hand, we have two infractions in the criminal code originally from the Freedom of the Press Bill in 1881. The offense of defamation and the offense of insult with an anti-Semitic connotation. They are punishable by a fine of up to 45,000 € plus 1 year imprisonment. But in practice, the courts rarely enforce them. There is a third offense, which is incitement to racial hatred, of which anti-Semitism is a part. It is punishable by the same quantum. And then, there is the issue of the denial of Holocaust. Here we must begin by saying that the recognition of the reality of the genocide and the participation of the French state have been very difficult in France. After the war, Charles de Gaulle and others were reluctant to fully recognize the persecution and deportation of French Jews and the role played in that process by the French state. They believed that it was better to forget the trauma of collaboration and build the myth of an anonymously resistant France in order to favor national unity. The resistentialist myth would gradually crumble in the 60s and 70s, and the truth about the responsibility of the French state in the deportation of Jews emerged thanks to the works of historians such as Robert Paxton and films like The Chagrin et la Pitié by Marcel Auffours. This brings us to the creation of the fourth offense punishable by the Penal Code, Holocaust denial. The Guesso Bill, a memorial law, has adopted in a particular context 2 months after the desecration of the Jewish cemetery in Carpentras in 1990. To put a stop to the dissemination of Holocaust denial theories and punish their authors. With this law, the denial of crimes against humanity committed during the World War II becomes an offense. But Holocaust denial has continued to spread in different strata of society. Just have a look at what is going on in French politics nowadays with a potential candidate for the upcoming presidential election and polemist Éric Zemmour. He multiplies shocking statements on the Dreyfus affair, Vichy, Pétain, and the Veldiv roundup, as well as on memorial laws that he wishes to abolish, including the Guesso Bill. In the context of anti-Semitism, we can see that the old prejudices are still quite powerful, like the cliché of Jews having money, power, and a double allegiance. That is what Dreyfus was accused of. And there is a particularly alarming point. If the Jewish population is one of the most accepted in French society today, it is also the target of very extreme tension. With the disappearance of the last witnesses and the transition from a living memory to a historical memory, the stakes are high. We must prevent Holocaust denial from seizing this unprecedented opportunity to undergo yet another metamorphosis and resurface in the public arena, giving new life to anti-Semitism, especially in the virtual world we are living in and the virality of fake news. In France, we have started to regulate this with the Avia Bill and also with the strengthening of Republican principles. But it is all together that we can succeed, and it should be one of the highest ambitions of the French presidency of the Council of the European Union with the Digital Services Act, as well as renewing our European common values. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Indeed, it's in the actual current events in France and other places. So we thank you very much, MP Marion Lehn. And we are going to Albania. And please, Madame Zamira Jean, address the conference. Thank you.
Thank you. Dear participants, I'm very honored to be part of this event as a representative of the Albanian Ministry of Education and to share with you some of our experiences in educating anti-Semitism in Albanian education. As you know, Albania is a small country, but it was the only country in Europe where no Jew died or surrendered, and was even the only country that was received more Jews than the Second World War than before. In Albania, there are some places like the National Historical Museum in Tirana and the Museum Solomon in Berat, dedicated to Holocaust and Jews, which are visited by students and local and foreign citizens. In July 2020, in Tirana, was inaugurated the Holocaust Memorial to honor Jews and Albanian citizens who protect Jews during the Second World War. This memorial holds the inscription in 3 languages, in Albanian, English, Hebrew. Albanians, Christians and Muslims risked their lives to protect and save the Jews. In 2004, the President of Albania promulgated January 27 as Holocaust Remembrance Day, and every year on this day, schools organize different activities with the common theme, Never Again. It's worth mentioning a 3-day activity held in September 2021, Culture Festival Albania and Israel, with the participation of Israel and Albanian composers and producers. The education system in Albania aims to educate our students with the highest human values such as justice, peace, harmony, cooperation, and the respect for others. The history curriculum, as well as the textbooks, address topics and activities of the Holocaust. For example, topics in the history textbooks such as Albanians and Jews during the Second World War stimulate students' curiosity to know the history and culture of Jews over the centuries, their courage, heroism, and strength to survive and rebuild. We have in focus to train students, prevent the repetition and denial of events such as the Holocaust, genocide, and other crimes against humanity, as recommended by the Council of Europe. The Ministry of Education in Albania has a close cooperation with Embassy of Israel, and together we have organized several workshops, seminars, and trainings, not only in Albania, but also in Israel, with the participation of history teachers, and also just promoted 2 books on Albanians during the Holocaust and the salvation of Jews for students and teachers in education. Since October 2019, a network of Holocaust teachers has been set up in Albania with history teachers from different cities who organize various training sessions on the Holocaust and anti-Semitism. Albanian history teachers were part of the regional Project Holocaust as starting point, comparing and exchanging, which has held on March 2019 in Skopje. Through this project, the teachers from Albania exchanges their experiences with colleagues from Serbia and North Macedonia. We have done a lot, but there is still more to do. The Ministry of Education in Albania, with the cooperation and support of the Council of Europe and the Embassy of Israel, we continue to draft and implement concrete action plans to fight anti-Semitism, which will focus on the first, definition and use of anti-Semitism in the education curriculum as defined by the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance. Ongoing training for teachers on how to address issues related to anti-Semitism, the Holocaust, genocide, violence, discrimination, etc. Translator and publication in Albania of the 4-volume publication on addressing anti-Semitism in schools prepared by UNESCO and HODIR for trainers and teachers in school in Albania. I fully support the vision of the European Jewish Association that education is the best vaccine against anti-Semitism. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madame Jean. Just before we started this convention, I learned a very important sentence from the Honorable President of the Parliament of Montenegro. He told us that it doesn't really matter how big the country is and how many people, but how they treat others. So thank you for the lesson, and it goes the same for any other small country in Europe. We appreciate you all. Thank you very much. And when we are talking about education and tools out of the box, one cannot ignore the social media, as we said before. One cannot ignore the really enormous influence of Facebook, YouTube, other medias on the young generation. So we're talking about out-of-the-box tools, but let's go to this big box over here, and hopefully we can get live to YouTube headquarters in London, I believe. And
it's actually
in Brussels. Oh, excellent. Hello there. I hope you can see us, Mr. Marco Pacini.
I can see you, and I hope you can hear me.
We hear you excellent, and we thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate your time, and we would really like to learn from you. As I opened my remarks here, a lot of influence, and no doubt that YouTube is doing enormous, great work for democracy, for transparency, for showing people what is going on in places that sometimes we don't even know where they are on the map. But unfortunately, these days, when every owner of a keyboard or an enter or a play button is an effective editor of hatred, of fake news, of incitements, I guess you guys had a lot of work trying to do better. We would like you to elaborate, if you please.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this invitation. It's for me an honor to be with you tonight, and I only regret that I cannot be with you in person. So first, let me thank you for having me. Thanks to the European Jewish Association for this important initiative to remember the Holocaust and combat anti-Semitism. Our lives begin to end the day that we become silent about things that matter. This is a sentence from Martin Luther King, and to us at YouTube, the issue of anti-Semitism and broadly hate speech matters a lot. So let me say it very loud and clear. We do not allow hate speech on YouTube. Anti-Semitism is a particularly pernicious example of hateful content that we are committed to tackling. More generally, we have taken significant steps towards combating such an hateful content, and we made some progress. Our policies specifically prohibit content that promotes or glorifies violence or incite hate against an individual or group based on protected attributes, including religion. Neither do we allow the nihilism, trivialization, or minimization of the Holocaust. In October 2020, we expanded our hate speech and harassment policies further to prohibit content promoting harmful conspiracy theories linked to real-world violence. One example, recent example, is QAnon theories, for example. If content directed against an individual is not covered by our hate speech policy, it may instead be covered by our policies against harassment and violence. That's very important to note. Like everyone else at YouTube, we grapple every day with issues related to free speech, free expression, and responsibility. But we believe that focusing only on removing content is not enough, and it's equally important to be thoughtful about how we treat all the content that we leave up. Freedom of speech should not be equated to freedom of reach. And that's why at YouTube we do what we do is also to reduce recommendations of borderline content. And at the same time, we raise up the prominence of authoritative voices. Borderline content comes close to, but it's not something that, for example, violate our policies, because otherwise we would remove it. And represent less than 1% of the content that is watched on YouTube. Our goal is not to give oxygen to this content, to not actively recommend it. On another side, for example, we want users looking for content documenting the Holocaust to find authoritative sources, including first-hand accounts from survivors.
If I may just ask you, as an expert,
Sure.
not only as a YouTube policy director, is it realistic in these days? Do you find it possible that in this era of social media, we can at all control what is going on out there in the big social media map?
I think control, I see your question, but I want to go back to the point that I was raising. There are two ways to have more control on content online. One is to remove content that is clearly illegal, but is also against our policies. I think our policies can help. The other way is to make sure that when platforms like YouTube are recommending content to their users, they recommend content coming from authoritative sources, and they reduce the visibility of content coming from sources that are not reliable or content that is borderline. I think that's the right strategy to address your problem. But of course, that's not something that we can do in a vacuum. That's why we launched in Malmo at the recent international forum, remembering Holocaust and to fight against hate speech, a new fund of something like 5 million euros dedicated to governments and NGOs to fight against anti-Semitism online, to build together content that can really help us to remember every day, and also to make sure that we provide alternative narrative to extremists. That's a very important fund. It's open for everyone to participate, and I think this is going in the right direction of creating public-private partnership around these important issues.
So Mr. Patriciani, you're not talking only about preventing and enforcing your rule, but something which will be proactive and will bring new content to combat anti-Semitism and hate speech, etc.
That's correct. That's correct. This fund is going in this direction.
I interrupt you one again. I think you ought to get applause for that, because it's the first time we hear about something that is proactive, not just preventing or keeping the rules, but really going over there. And we say in Hebrew, kol hakavod, really great thing.
Yes, indeed. And this is really to build together content, meaningful content that can be promoted through our platforms in different ways. So if anyone of the guests tonight is interested to know more, please, our friends from Asia can really put us in touch, and we are looking for opportunities to work together with governments and NGOs on this important topic.
I see a lot of members of parliament and Ministry of Education waiting for your contact, and we're going to give them. Any other specific tool you might suggest us that we can try and implement in our countries?
Of course, I think another very important tool is the Trusted Flaggers program. I know that you are a member of the program, but maybe other NGOs that are in this room or law enforcement that are in this room would be interested to get in touch with us. This is a program that allows us to work together with experts on a given topic. And when we receive notices from these experts, so first we start a dialogue, we train them about our policies, how to use our flagging tools. It's really a dialogue that we are starting. But then when the NGO is trained, when we receive a notice coming from these trusted flaggers, we give the right priority to these notices. This is another very important program, is going in the direction of removing content. Here, before a few minutes ago, I spoke about creating positive content. Here is about removing, but this is also something important that we need to keep on doing. And so we really welcome collaboration with all interested parties also on this area.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it, and we'll hear about the Go Flag Yourself project in a few minutes. Since there are so many dignitaries here in the hall, and I don't think we have much opportunities to talk with someone who influenced that much on our kids, on our future. Any question from the audience? No. So we thank you so much for being with us. We appreciate your effort, and thank you for your time. And we, of course, will give your contact, with your permission, to everyone attending this conference, and hope better things might come out of it. Thank you so much, Director of Public Policy for Europe in YouTube, Mr. Marco Pancini. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you. Have a good night. Bye.
That was interesting. From YouTube, we are going not so far, but to the Netherlands. And we are very honored to have with us Mr. Ulysse Alian, Justice and Security Committee, House of Representatives of the Netherlands. Please.
Do you have a little bit of water, please? Thank you. Good evening, all of you. Most of you look like you need a drink, I think, or maybe some food. Perfect. So I will not speak too long. I am honored to be here this evening. I want to thank Chief Rabbi of the Netherlands, Benjamin Jacobs, for introducing me to the EGA and making this trip possible. I want to share, don't worry, I promise to be short,